Hi, guys. Welcome to the CG101 podcast, episode 3. Today, we're super excited to have someone really special with us. This is Erin. I'm not going to talk too much about her work and who she is, but I'm just going to read you a tiny introduction. So, Erin is a senior producer at Unknown Worlds Entertainment, currently working on Subnautica 2, as you can see in her really awesome t-shirt. And she has an incredible career that has been going for over the past 20 years. So we're going to talk about it and we're going to expand on it. She's also a woman in games ambassador, and she's really passionate about leadership, collaboration, and, empowering creative teams. So we're really excited to share her journey with you guys. And welcome, Erin.
Thank you.
So do you want to expand a little bit more about what do you do as a senior producer at Unknown Worlds Entertainment?
Absolutely. So the interesting thing about being a producer, it really depends from studio to studio what your responsibility matrix is. Some studios, generally speaking, you're just a project manager. In other studios, as a producer, you tend to be more the vision holder. For me, it's sort of a mixture of both. I work with a group of POs, so product owners, that set the direction. I work with them to do estimates on the work packages, making sure that all of the Jenga pieces are putting together, so the upstream and the downstream implications or dependencies are laid out. Doing a lot of time in Jira, being a little bit of a ticket monkey, making sure that everybody knows what they need to be doing when, why, and sometimes how. Scheduling meetings, being a note taker, or as I generally do, hit the record button because, simply put, I don't take very good notes. And basically anything that needs to be done for the team so that we can make sure that the product is successful and the team is successful and healthy to be able to deliver.
I love that you said that as well. Not just, delivering deadlines and making sure that the team delivers, but also keeping the team healthy in order to make sure that they are delivering and in a, positive way as well. How do you deal with that? Because obviously you have to deal with deadlines all the time. You're the producer, want to make sure that things are done on time, but how do you deal with keeping them motivated without stressing them out?
That's something that I'm successful at and non-successful at. It really depends on the circumstance. I've learned over the years that you can either be a bull in a china shop, which means is that you tell people what to do, or you can work with them, build the relationships, build the trust, so that when you go to them and have the tough conversations, they understand that it's coming from a good place, not just you trying to be, the one telling people what to do. So I spend a lot of time building relationships. Relationship building, I think, is the top priority for anybody that works as a producer or a project manager, making sure that you build that trust so that people will be honest with you when things may be delayed, and understand that, yes, sometimes you have to be the bad guy, I guess, and say, you've got 2 days to get this done. Please focus in and get it done, or it's good enough. Which is oftentimes difficult for people to accept, that sometimes things are good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I guess especially when dealing with artists, right? Like, I feel like we're quite precious of our work. Wouldn't you
Yes.
say, Ethan?
Yeah, I would say even more so probably in advertising because, you don't get as much time to finalize stuff. A lot of the
Absolutely.
time it just has to be good enough, not not perfect.
That's something that I know a lot of people struggle with. I even struggled with it early in my career. What I start to sort of my mantra in my head, and my teams have heard me say this a lot, is that we should never be struggling, or we should never be striving for perfection. We should be striving for excellence. And people say, well, there's not a difference between those two words. And I said, absolutely, there are. Something can be excellent without being perfect, whereas something that's perfect obviously always has the excellence. If you always struggle or strive for that excellence, sometimes you are more able to accept that good enough is good enough. But as a producer, one of the things that I always look for is, what is our agreed upon acceptance criteria? If we have an agreed upon acceptance criteria of what is good enough, then we're all starting on an even playing field. And sometimes that makes that good enough thing easier, even for not just artists, but for everybody, when it's agreed upon ahead of time.
Yeah. I mean, I also wanted to, dive now into, you're talking about, your experience leading the teams and, what's good enough and how can we move on, how can we achieve it. But I want to maybe like go back in time and ask you, like, how did you get into games? Like, what was your path into get into this place?
Absolutely. I fell into games. believe it or not. I have a BA and an MA in political science, which obviously prepared me to work in tech and gaming. Believe it or not, a lot of producers come from a similar background as I do. Maybe it's that we learn how to do the analysis or patience. Or I don't know what it is, but I find that there are a lot of producers that started in political science. But for me, I've always been technical. I've sort of had one finger into tech almost my entire life. I'm old, and my kindergarten class was the first kindergarten class to have computers in the classroom. This would have been I'm not going to say when, way back in the day. And so I've always done that. But I made a decision early on when I was in school that I didn't want to make comp sci or the more technical side my career. Ironic, isn't it? Because it was my hobby, and I didn't want to mar that. But I said if my technical experience could help me build my career, that was fine. I think that lasted about 15 minutes. My first job, my first big girl job, as I call it, I was working for our local government. And my executive director at the time figured out very quickly that I was more technical than I led on. And so asked me to start managing technical projects. So I spent 10 years doing that. I managed over 80 projects in 10 years. These weren't small, tiny little projects. They were things like introducing wireless internet to all of our government buildings. It was 200 plus buildings across the province. Building our digital identity solution so that we knew that you were you on the other end of the computer. Building e-services. I did a bunch of different things, but after 10 years, I realized that this just wasn't quite the dinner I ordered. I know that's a strange analogy, but I was doing the same thing over and over again. I wasn't challenged. My career had stagnated. And somebody very close to me said, sometimes you need to move out to move up. And that was a hard pill to swallow. But in February 2017, I put in my resignation, and I had a beautiful pension. I could have retired very early if I had stayed, but it just wasn't making my heart feel good. So I left. I resigned in February. I stayed until June. Believe it or not, they asked me to stay until June. And then I took a year off. I contracted a little bit, but I needed to decide what I wanted to do when I grew up. Now, I know
love
that's
that.
strange to say because I was an adult, but I didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And a year to the day of me leaving the government, I applied for a job at BioWare, thinking, oh, they're not going to hire me. I'm some little civil servant. There's no way. And so I went through the gauntlet interviews, as I call it, where you interview with everybody. I think I did 8 interviews, and they offered me a role. It was a more junior role, so I stepped back a little bit in my career. Didn't last long. They realized very quickly that I kind of knew what I was doing, but I was hired to manage the writing and editing team at BioWare. And anybody who knows a BioWare game, that's what BioWare is. It's their writing and their editing. And so I went from doing that to doing bronze and gold cinematics, which I absolutely loved. I love cinematics. That's sort of my happy place. And then kept on going. I did Critical Path and all that type of thing. Unfortunately, it was a contract and the game wasn't as successful as it should have been. So I left after a year. And then I was back to what do I want to do when I grow up? And so I went back to tech because that was what I knew and where I was comfortable. So my specialty is digital identity and blockchain. I've got a lot of experience in both of those areas. So I dabbled a little bit. I worked for a crypto company, which didn't align with my personal ethos as much as it should have. I loved the tech. I just didn't like the politics that were attached to it. And then I was approached about joining Relic Entertainment. When they first approached me, I said no, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back to gaming. But I was given an opportunity to work on Age of Empires, which was my favorite game. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend that doing that to anybody because you learn the secret sauce of your favorite IP and it's just not as fun anymore. But I worked on Age of Empires and Company of Heroes, and I'm very proud of both of those IPs. And then unfortunately was laid off, like very many people in the industry. Literally about a day after I was laid off, I was reached out about Unknown Worlds because they had recently hired a lead producer that I had worked with. And he asked if I was interested in applying. And I think my first instinct was to say no again. Because the boom bust echo, as I call it, of the gaming industry is really stressful. Every 2 years, you're looking for a new job because of layoffs and all of this. And I didn't want to do it again. But I said, sure, let me meet the team, and I fell in love with the team and I fell in love with the IP. We are a very unique studio. I know everybody says that, but we really are. People are so incredibly invested in what we're doing and passionate. Now that's good and bad. It was almost a little refreshing for me to see that. And, it was on the precipice of going from indie to a more AA kind of studio. And I saw opportunity where I could come in and lend some of the experience that I had to build the pipelines. And so this is where I am now. I've been here for 17 months, I guess, just plugging along on SN2.
That's amazing. I think definitely your experience shows all throughout that, you have so many transferable skills, I guess, from one to the other. But I'm curious about something that you just said, because you said your first instinct was to say no to some opportunities.
Yes. Yeah.
How did you overcome that? Because sometimes I find myself saying no to myself for something. Like, no, I don't think I'm good for this role, or I don't think I'm good for this thing. Like, how did you overcome it?
I think I'm at a position in my career where I'm comfortable saying no. I haven't always been comfortable saying no. I've struggled with that a lot, but I've come to realize that I have value and my experience and my knowledge is valued wherever I am, and that I know myself better than anybody to say whether or not I will be able to perform in a specific role, and not be afraid to say, hey, no, this just isn't it. But it is hard. It is very hard to be able to say that. I think one of the biggest things that I learned after leaving the government, I was right at the time when we were talking a lot about emotional intelligence. And I can remember when I first heard about it, I shook my head and said, I didn't buy into it, because that was the culture at the time. But once I had a little bit of time to self-reflect and realize that anytime I act or react, people around me will feel it as well. It puts a little bit more pressure on you to make sure that you're putting yourselves into good positions. And that's why I always look at every job role and say, am I really going to be able to perform to the best of my abilities and have a positive impact on the people around me? And if I can't say yes, then that's not the right place for me.
That's so sweet that you look after the team like that. I don't know if even you have any questions about that before we move on to the next part.
Not really. I think kind of hearing from you as from the production side on a deeper level is very interesting, your perspective on things. And I think, it's very noticeable when you have a producer that cares about you and not just, the client. And like you were saying, back to kind of the earlier part, is that you can tell when you're having an important conversation or an uncomfortable conversation that it is, they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. It's not, personal or anything. Whereas if you're dealing with a producer where it's maybe they're very client orientated and there's no really personal connection with them, it can be a lot more difficult to have those conversations.
It's particularly difficult in sort of this changed environment where we're all remote.
Mm-hmm.
And, I spend probably 70% of my time communicating by text. And sometimes text can be very sterile. And, you don't get the inflections or, all those little things that when you're having an eye-to-eye conversation, or if you're in person, you can actually see body language, that kind of thing. So that can be challenging in a remote environment. It can also be challenging when you're not feeling the best about yourself, because you've got to put on that bright, positive face and make sure that the team feels motivated and supported. But I always say that generally speaking, if you don't see your producer that often, that usually means that things are good, because there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the background that people never see, side conversations, side support. I'll see somebody having a bad day and I'll drop them a message saying, hey, what's going on? Do you need to take an afternoon just to decompress? That's the stuff that happens in the background that shouldn't just be a producer's job. Should be everybody supporting each other on a team.
Yeah, absolutely. I also had a question within what you just said because you were also talking about, how you switched industries and how you felt like where you were stuck and you wanted to try something else. And I feel like nowadays we have a lot of people switching careers, either like in a lateral move within the industry, or even like moving out of the industry, or from outside to the industry to this industry. So what would you say to anyone thinking about, maybe I'm not too happy with what I'm doing? Like, what would you say to them?
I would say not to be afraid. Change is scary. I mean, I'm the first one to say that I sometimes don't do well with change, but to not be afraid to make the change, and at very least inquire about it. And then possibly be prepared to take a step back if you're changing industries. And so I look at myself. When I left the government, I was at a certain level. I was, higher level. I was making a certain amount of money. And in order for me to change careers or change streams, even though it's all the garden and it's just different vegetables, I needed to take a step back in my career to be able to step forward. So I took a title drop, a significant title drop. I took a pretty significant pay drop, but it only lasted about a year so that I could prove myself. And that was fair. I mean, I was an unknown entity. I had no experience. And if they would have paid me what I was making or given me a title like I had previously, it may not have worked out to their advantage. So that's it. Not to be afraid. And then the last thing is find a mentor. Find somebody that has done this. Or, there are a lot of us in the industry that have sort of left and come back and left and come back. Talk to them, see what they can do. I regularly get people reaching out to me saying, hey, I'm looking to make a shift from this career to that career. Can we have a half an hour coffee? Totally happy to do that. I always say to them, I can't help you get a job because I don't have that ability, but I can absolutely help you figure out how to navigate and what to do next.
I think that's really sweet. It's nice to hear that, you get to share your experience. Was there someone or something that you reached out to that helped you, like a mentorship scheme, or did you reach out to someone?
It's funny. I do a lot of mentorship and people ask me why I do it. And I say, because I wish I would have had somebody. I never had any role models when I started my career. And particularly, it can be challenging for minorities or for women to find others that have done similar, because oftentimes women in industries like this are seen as unicorns. Whether or not that's right doesn't matter, but not having that really impacted me. And so if I can help one person have a mentor or somebody to talk to, now that I'm in the later parts of my career, I'm more than happy to do it.
I guess this ties well with, because you are now an ambassador for Women in Games.
Absolutely. That's something that I take very seriously. Women in Games is a fantastic organization. It started out small and it keeps growing and growing with more ambassadors. And I think that one of our roles is to look local. So obviously look around us, down the street, and how we can promote getting more women and marginalized groups in games, but also looking at a bigger structure. So outside of our local communities. And I know that there's chapters across the world. They do regular meetups. And it doesn't necessarily need to be, you don't need to be a woman to be involved. We do have people that are gender binary, and non-female that join the group, because it's not just about women, right? It's anybody in games, and anybody can be an advocate and a supporter.
Oh, that's really sweet. Well, now we know. We're gonna put on the resources so that
There
everyone
you go.
can
Yes,
go in
absolutely.
and join the Women in Games community as well. Have you had a moment that maybe you were like, yes, this was the right decision, I'm in the right place? Like, have you had a moment where you almost like take it all in?
I do that regularly. I'm very thankful that I've been given all the opportunities that I have. Now, I've worked hard. I'm not going to say that I haven't. And people will often say that they feel they've gotten lucky. And I don't necessarily feel that I've gotten lucky, because I may have been in the right place at the right time. But I've worked my butt off. And I think that most people in gaming have done that. I mean, it's not an easy industry. But I look back regularly and I can see sort of those bright spots. This sounds really silly, but I was given a Age of Empires hoodie and it said developer on it. And I kind of went, like, I mean, I'm even getting a little teary-eyed about it now. And I just thought, I knew that I had made it because I had that, right? This is like, it's proof, really. I'm a developer. I'm that person. We just came back from a retreat in Barcelona. The company, we get together once a year in person to just, I jokingly say that we break bread. Because once you've broken bread with people, it's a different relationship. And leaving that at the end of the week, I kind of felt, yeah, this is the place that I should be. And seeing all of the messages of people, talking about their trips to Taco Bell in Barcelona, which I won't get started on, but talking about that bonding, I realized that, yeah, this is my jam. This is the dinner I ordered.
That's really sweet. That's very sweet. Well, I love that. Thank you for sharing all of that. That's really sweet. That almost made me like, I'm super happy to hear all of that. I love it. I mean, I love that also, like, you get to look back and, reflect on, because it's amazing, like, all of your journey and hearing that and seeing like what you have been involved. But also I think it's really brave to say, yeah, actually, this is not I'm not really happy here. Like maybe there's something else for me. And yeah, it's not a step that anyone would just take. So yeah, congrats on all of your incredible journey so far. 'Cause it's awesome. I wonder, what is your day-to-day look like as the senior producer?
And so my day is a little bit different than a lot of producers. While I am in Canada, I work European time. What does that mean? I start at 5 o'clock in the morning and I am supposed to end at 1. This gives me about 4 hours for the European side of my teams and about 4 hours for the North American. So the first thing that I do when I come in the morning is I do my dailies, or as I call my dailies, check my email, check any bugs that have come in overnight, see any tickets that have moved or been placed around. And then I spend some time actually surveying the industry. What's going on in gaming? What games are coming out? Is there any games that are new that have been introduced that may be in direct competition to what we're doing on Subnautica? And then just looking generally in tech, like I looked this morning that they released the new 5.6 or 5.7 Unreal patch notes. And I reviewed those, shaking a little bit because they scare me. They're amazing, but they scare me doing from an implementation perspective. But just understanding what's going on in the industry. And then from there, generally speaking, I start my stand-ups. On any given day, I may have 2 or 3 teams doing stand-ups. So just making sure that kind of stuff is going on. And then I spend a lot of my day from there, either in Jira, so doing backlog grooming, moving things in and out depending on priorities, because the priorities are continuously shifting. And then spending a lot of time on roadmaps, making sure that my roadmaps are up to date, that the estimates are still correct because things change from day to day, finding out if there's any blockers on the team, and then basically doing whatever the team needs so that they can focus in on doing their jobs and I can focus in on chasing down any requirements, making sure that they are not blocked or stopped from doing what they're good at, which is whatever team. Like if it's a technical team, making sure that their tech bits are working properly. And some days I'm in meetings from the minute I start till the minute I end. And sometimes I've got a little bit more free time to chase down information. But yeah. It's a mixed bag.
That's pretty cool. I wondered, because now I did never realize that, of course, it makes sense. You have to keep up to date with, upcoming other games and, upcoming releases and stuff like that. I wonder, like, do you play games? Like, is there like your own like extra research, as I call it, when I, play games myself or watch film?
It's interesting for me. My taste in games has shifted a lot as I've gotten older. When I was not that much younger, but when I was younger, sitting and grinding away at a game for 10 hours or 12 hours was nothing. That was a Saturday. But now as I've gotten a little bit older and my body doesn't like to sit in a chair for more than 6 hours, my carpal tunnel doesn't let me to hold a controller quite as much, I've started to switch towards more cozy games because it's given me the opportunity to dip in and dip out. Play a lot of games on my phone because they're quick and easy. I was playing a lot of Diablo because, believe it or not, I firmly stand that Diablo is a cozy game. I know people shock when I say that because I can go in and play it for 20 minutes, run a mission, feel achieved, and walk away. And I've spent a lot of time playing Hogwarts Legacy. I will admit that. But those are my personal fun stuff. But anytime I see a game that's come out that may be similar to what we're doing in Subnautica, I'll pop in and play. Sometimes I pop into Subnautica 1 or Below Zero just to kind of see how we did things there so that we can see how it relates to what we're doing now. Yeah, it really all depends. My Steam library is gross and large and has a lot more games than what I ever can play, but I do purchase a lot to, even if I look at it for 15 minutes, because it's giving me a different perspective.
Nice. That's pretty awesome, to be honest.
And my favorite game, I will say, my favorite game I play every day, and people laugh at me when I say it, is Pokemon Go. I play
love
Pokemon
that.
Go every day.
Nice. I respect that a lot, actually. That's really awesome. Wait, Ethan, do you get to do the same? Like in advertising, do you get to like poke in and watch a bunch of adverts, or do you just avoid altogether?
I try and avoid watching too many ads because I feel like I'm like, you can't hit the skip button for your own work. You kind of have to see stuff through. Occasionally, though, you do get funny stuff. Like at the moment, we're working on an advert and we've done the main advert and then the director cut has been done, but the director cut is wildly different, like on a creepy level. Like the main advert's very normal, but the director's cut is like, it's not even an advert anymore. So occasionally I'm quite interested in like the director cut side of my work, but normally the ads are just quite normal. And then occasionally you get a fun one. So
It's funny, our QA lead does a bug of the week that we usually find while we do triage during the week, and they're always the most amusing bugs. And it's not something that we're ever gonna ship with. It's whether or not our avatar is like misshapen or has funny hands or whatever it is. But it's something that's levity and it's fun, and it's sort of like the director's cuts or the blooper reel. Which I think, and I don't know if this is going to be happening, but I would love to see us produce a blooper reel at the end of the game, because we've seen some really funny things that, people that love the Subnautica franchise will probably giggle at. If they'd never played Subnautica before, they wouldn't understand why we found it funny. But yeah, it's my highlight of the week. I quite like doing seeing the bug of the week.
I think every company's got their own kind of thing. At my previous company, it was guessing for each project when it finished, guessing how many versions were done for the highest asset. So everyone be guessing, like 70, 80, and then they come out and it's like, we actually did 91 versions of this. And so that was always a fun little game.
Nice. I love both. I think this should be, it would be really interesting if at some point they start releasing that, to the public more, because I also think people would understand how much work there's behind something, like how many versions and like how many hours spent, or how many, like you said, bugs of something just exploding for no reason. Yeah, I think it would be really cool to see people getting a bit more in depth. But yeah, anyways, leading to my next question, I also was wondering, is there something that is probably the most misunderstood from being a producer? Like, is something that people think that is a producer's role, but it's not, or something that is unexpected that is part of your role, but people don't really know?
We regularly joke that we didn't realize how much time we would be spending on providing emotional and psychological support to the team. I didn't realize that as well. Now, I see that as a privilege. When we were at the retreat, I had a lot of people coming to me and having conversations with me about this random thing or how they were feeling. And I was surprised to find out that people were feeling certain ways, but I was humbled that they felt comfortable enough to come and have those conversations with me, that they felt that psychological safety that they could do that. I never expected to do that as a producer or a project manager or anything like that at all. And I take that very, very seriously. And my team knows that if they action something with me, the first thing I'll ask is, are you complaining or do you want me to do something about it? Because if you're just complaining, I will listen. I will be the biggest ear that you need. But I need to know if you want me to do something about it. Because if you don't, then I need to know. And so that's something I've learned over the years, is that not everything needs to be actioned. Sometimes people just need an ear to listen. And we do as producers, we spend a lot of time doing that. So yeah, I think that's the biggest one that was surprising to me.
Would you say that, because obviously I feel like nowadays there's a bit more resources on, mental health and avoiding burnout and, motivation and stuff like that. Would you say that as a producer, are those resources useful? Like, is it useful to learn a bit more about how to talk about it?
Absolutely. One of the things that I feel quite fortunate about was when I was in the government, they were very staunch with making sure that all of their managers and their leaders had training to recognize certain signs, whether or not it was somebody that potentially could get violent, somebody that was having health issues. I always use the example, if I see somebody rubbing their left arm, I always ask if they're okay, because it could be a sign of a heart attack. And I want to make sure that because you may not recognize it yourself, but somebody else saying, hey, are you okay? Is important. So yes, I think that for me, that was really fortunate that I got the opportunity to have that training. A lot of the resources are there. However, the people have to be willing to ask the questions to even know that the resources are there. So they have to have the psychological safety and the ability to ask the question before they can ever get the resources. And I think that's always the biggest disconnect with a lot of organizations will say, we have all of these resources. Why didn't so-and-so utilize them? And my counter to that is, A, they may not have recognized that they needed a resource to support themselves. B, they didn't know how to engage the resource. Or C, they didn't know who to talk to help them get the resources that they may need. And I think that that's part of what production does as well, as with team leads. Team leads are also responsible for that.
That's pretty cool that you guys, first you managed to get the training in some companies, to help you to communicate more effectively and stuff like that. But also interesting to see that, people is looking out for you and the resources there. I guess is literally what you said, is just giving them that safety net. It's
Now,
okay to ask.
I will say that some people tend to get a little bit frustrated with that, and I understand why. I mean, you don't like anybody calling out things that maybe make you feel uncomfortable, but that once again goes to building that relationship and making sure that they have the psychological safety and the trust to know that if I'm saying, hey, I see that you're rubbing your arm, I'm not trying to be intrusive, I'm not trying to be a pain. I just want to make sure that you're okay because you may not even know it yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Is there something that like you have done or has helped you to create that safety space with your team that you feel like, okay, this is the way that I like to talk to my team to create that safety net, especially maybe when you're new to the company and you're not, they don't know you just yet.
My biggest thing that I usually spend the first month in any organization or starter or any new team learning who's who in the zoo. I need to understand the people and their personalities. And I can sometimes be difficult to deal with, as can anybody. My approach doesn't work with everybody. And that's fine. But it's building the relationships. Relationships is huge. Basically building influence. That is pretty much the only way that anybody in production or project management role can actually get things done is through influence. It's not by pressure, it's not by force, it's by influence. But that's all related to relationship building. One of my things is that I will just reach out to people and ask them how they're doing, even if they're not directly on my team. Because I want to make sure that they're good and that they know that they have a support structure. I recently had 2 people join the team. I will probably never work directly with them, but I reached out to them just to introduce myself and saying, hey, I know you've got a very talented and skilled producer. I have no doubt that they'll be able to support you. However, if you need additional support, feel free to reach out to me. I am here for you. That's fine. But it's taking the time to build the relationships and not being frustrated if it takes a while with everybody. One of the tacks that I've always used is I always ask who my most difficult person is on the team, or I call them my curmudgeon. It's who's going to be the toughest cookie to crack, or and that's the one that I know when I've cracked that cookie that I've done my job, because they feel comfortable coming to me and being candid and honest and not being afraid to tell me the truth, even if I'm not going to like the truth, but I still need to know.
Oh, that's really sweet that, you try to, reach out to everyone, but also, like who might be a bit more difficult to open up with. And that's really sweet. I had some awesome producers through my life, and, I feel like the ones that definitely like reach out the most and like they definitely make you feel safe. So I don't feel so bad when I have to say like, I'm sorry, like I just haven't managed to finish this thing. Yeah. I think it's part of it, right? When you just can't finish it on time. But yeah, to me, it's like I think I learned that it's okay. Like if I didn't finish on time, especially when I was starting, I was struggling more with my deadlines because you're newer, your experience is less, and I think yeah, that they definitely were like, don't worry, like we knew you were gonna struggle. It's fine. It's part of the process of learning. And I think yeah, I had a really awesome mentor who was a producer. It was a production coordinator, and he was the one that said, if you don't tell your production team, they won't know if you're struggling, or like they won't
True.
know if you're behind. And then maybe you're doing like a silent overtime and you're not telling anyone. And all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, no, they're managing because I can see the result here, but they didn't know that you were struggling behind scenes.
One of the things that I often tell my teams is that I have levers that I can pull if I know they're having issues. But if I don't know they're having issues, whether it's delivering or communication problems or downstream, upstream dependencies, whatever it is, if I don't know, I can't pull those levers. And while I wish I was psychic and that I could just Harry Potter it out of people's brains, I unfortunately don't have that skill. So the only way that I will know and be able to help or pull those levers is if they communicate and let me know what's going on.
I'm wondering, I love asking these questions to people because I've always find it useful. To me, it's like, you're an incredible career, crazy games that you have been working on, and like amazing titles and AAA games. Is there a moment where you maybe hit that imposter syndrome and almost like that, surprises you? And how do you overcome that, or like how have you been dealing with it?
I've jokingly said that anybody that claims to not suffer from imposter syndrome is lying. I think that imposter syndrome is our natural state as a human being. We all struggle with it. I used to use the analogy that every time I would get down on myself, I'd worked with a career coach, and they told me anytime you get down on yourself, look at your resume. Just look at your resume. And don't look at your resume comparing it to anybody else. Look at your resume just for what it is and remember all the things that you've done, the successes and the failures, because I think you learn more from the failures than you do from the successes, if I'm being honest. And so, yeah, I regularly have imposter syndrome. People are oftentimes surprised to hear that. I just have better coping mechanisms than maybe what I did when I was younger. I do. I look at my LinkedIn profile and I go, oh yeah, I did that. Oh yeah, I did that. And then I try not to talk down about myself, because this is something that people do. They're like, oh, but that was easy. But was it really? Like, was it really easy to walk in if you use my example, was it really easy for me to leave a career that was comfortable and walk into the gaming industry? And I was a gamer, but I'd never worked in the gaming industry. I didn't know how to manage a writing team, but I figured it out. And I feel that I was successful at it. So I don't want to discount myself from now. Now I can look back and go, that was nothing. But at the time, it was a big thing, and give myself the win for that. And it's okay to give yourself the win.
I really love that. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to have it on my desk.
I wish people would realize that imposter syndrome isn't something to be embarrassed about. It's not. We all go through it. I firmly believe anybody who says they do or they don't is lying. They've fooled themselves, or they don't recognize it as imposter syndrome.
It was interesting because for us on the first episode, actually, Ethan and I were talking about our careers on the podcast. And we also were, we tapped into imposter syndrome for ourselves. And I think, Ethan, you said it was like almost like an up and down thing. Like sometimes you feel it more, sometimes you feel it less. Yeah.
Never really goes away, just changes.
I think it's useful because I think the first time I heard someone, because especially when you're starting or when you're a student and you're looking into maybe breaking in, I think you almost don't think that exists to people that is already working. And I think the first time I heard it, I was like, oh wait, like, people also like have self-doubt. And I think to me it was quite impactful to hear, that everyone's human and like, you have up and downs, but definitely like looking back and giving yourself the win, like you said, I think is really important. For sure, I like looking at my old work.
Yeah. That's it. And then also looking at your old work and seeing how far you've come. I read a quote one day that said that, for me, the little girl at 12 years old, if she'd look at me now, she'd be like, dude, that's freaking cool, right? I mean, I think about that 12-year-old me, and she would look at what I do now and just be so proud of me. Whereas me, I'm sitting here going, whatever. But no, she wouldn't. So I always look back to that little girl, for me anyway, to say she's proud of me. She is impressed with what I've done with my life. And that helps me keep me grounded. And particularly when I'm having a rough time, because everybody does. Everybody struggles. But you have to find something that brings you out of that struggle.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. I also was wondering, of course, like games, films, advertising, TV, we're all creatives. We all work with deadlines. That sort of thing, right? Like, of course, like you said, like sometimes we want to go forever because for us it's never finished, and then production has to be like, don't worry guys, we're wrapping up.
It's good enough.
It's okay. But like, what keeps you motivated on this super fast-paced environment that I think is our creative industries?
I guess for me, I like the fast-paced nature. When things are quiet, I get uncomfortable. I like to blink and it's the end of the day. I thrive on that. I actually thrive under the pressure as well. But ultimately, for me, what keeps me going every day is knowing that for this IP, there's such a love from the community. There's such a passion. I mean, you just go and look at the Reddit posts or go into Discord and watch the conversations. And that's what keeps me going, is knowing that we're building this game for these people, millions of people that are just dying to play it. It's number one on the wish list right now. And a lot of people could look at that and say that it's daunting and it's scary because we've got a lot of big shoes to fill, which is true, but it's also incredibly exciting and a driving force. We're going to ship an amazing game and the community is going to love it. And that's what gets me up every day. And I never second guess that.
That's really sweet. Actually, you said something really interesting in there, because I feel like now we have more and more IPs that continue, right? Like, of course, like Subnautica 2 is the second game of the Subnautica 1. But I feel like we're seeing more and more IPs have a comeback. And like you said, there's really big shoes to fill. Do you ever just go like on Reddit and maybe like see what people is liking and be like, yeah, we're doing that, and just say nothing and almost be like, yeah.
More than I care to admit. Now, I've really tried to stay away from some of the negativity because there has been a lot of negativity over the last 6 months. But then I started to realize that reading the negativity is part of the entire experience. I need to see what people don't want so that I understand what people do. I need to see what people's fears are and all that. So yeah, I spend quite a bit of time. That's part of my daily, is that I want to understand what the community sentiment is. I want to know what the community expectation is. Do I comment on it? I did for a long time. I spent quite a bit of time in our Discord, and I worked with I answered a lot of questions in our Discord, and I've sort of moved on from that a little bit. But yeah, I'm always around.
Oh, that's
People
really
know
cool.
that.
That's very cool. Well, I think for me, like as we get almost to, I like honestly to me like this podcast just flew by. I could listen to this for hours. I'm very motivated now. Actually, I almost want to go back to work now and like finish my stuff. But to me, it's like, is there advice that you would give either to your younger self or anyone that might be starting now that wants to go into this type of role that you wish you knew sooner?
I think my biggest thing is that I wished I wasn't as afraid to make the change. I spent 10 years wanting to leave and do something different, and I was so afraid of disappointing my parents because I had, a big girl job with a big girl pension and all of these things. I had a mortgage and all the things that I needed to pay, and I was afraid. I was terrified. Part of that was my imposter syndrome, that I couldn't do anything anywhere else. Part of it was commitments and family and all of those things. I think that would have been the big thing, is that to not be afraid. Don't just do things because you think that's what you're supposed to do. This is something that I was raised with. You get yourself a good job, you stay for 25 years, you retire, you get the wristwatch, and that's not the world anymore. I think the average person in tech and tech adjacent lasts about 16 months per job. That was the most recent stat that I saw. So being willing to take the chance and take the jump and understand that sometimes you have to move out to move up, which is hard.
That was pretty awesome, actually. I love that quote. I think, like I said, to me, it sounds amazing that, you were brave to take that decision. And I do hope that people, maybe like if they are doubting or they have, maybe it's this, uh, yeah, super inspiring, Erin. Ethan, do you have any other questions for Erin?
I don't think I have any questions. I think just jealous of the artists that get to have you as a producer. It sounds like they have a blast.
Unfortunately, I'm not looking after the artists anymore. They're being handled under another very talented producer, but I'm always around. That's the one thing. Even if I'm not directly people's producers or team's producers, I get reached out to on the regular because I seem to have my fingers in so many different things. And if I don't know the answers to things, I'm like a pit bull. I'll find the answer.
I think
That's what we do.
But even like, as you're saying, reaching out to people, like messaging them, it's those things. I think even if you're not necessarily in charge of them or their team or whatever, having someone that can be reached out to that easily, I think is quite a reassuring role to have.
Sometimes we need to have empathy and compassion for everybody around us, not just the people that we directly work with day to day. There's not enough empathy and compassion in the world. And right now, that's something that we all need, I think. It doesn't matter which country you're in or even what industry you're in right now. We all need the empathy and compassion. It's the only way we're going to get through.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we let you go and wrap up, are there any like extra resources or like things that have been useful to you that you might want to share before we go? Because of course we're going to be talking about women in games, and we'll leave that in our CG101 Discord. But if there's anything else that has helped you that you want to share, is there?
So one of the things that I encourage everybody to do is to get very active on LinkedIn. For good or bad, LinkedIn is our job networking site. Building those relationships oftentimes can mean the difference between getting an interview and not. I know that I've been I'm not going to say lucky because I don't believe in luck when it comes to roles, but I've been fortunate that a lot of my connections have gotten at least an interview for me. And I know it's hard. I know building a network is hard and it's not something you can do overnight, but I curate my LinkedIn, I spend generally 4 to 5 hours a week just reaching out to people, building relationships, looking for jobs for other people, because I do send jobs around to people that I know that are looking. So LinkedIn is the huge thing. In my dad's age, there were something called service clubs. They're not really a thing anymore, but they're similar. So it's being involved in things like Women in Games. There are a plethora of organizations. Joining those organizations, even, it doesn't matter which stage you're in your career. It's really, really important to join them because they're connections and you get to swap stories and best practices and learn new things. I regularly talk to producers, new and old. I find that I can get as much from reverse mentorship, so people that are new in the industry that are maybe more apt to look at things differently than the way I do, because I'm old and curmudgeoned and I follow processes the way that I was taught. But learning about that's something that's really important. And I think the last one, I firmly believe it. It doesn't matter if you've been in the industry for 15 minutes or 50 years, find a mentor, and not just a mentor that's above you. Okay. Find somebody. I get as much, and I've said this already, I get as much out of somebody who's new to the industry as a reverse mentorship as I would getting for somebody that's been in the industry longer than me or tangentially to me. There's always something to learn. So getting involved in those organizations. And I volunteer a lot from my old university, even though my education doesn't match what I do. They tend to match me with people that are looking to get into games or tech, and it's very fulfilling. And the last thing I will say is that everybody, from my perspective, we owe it to the industry and to the people that are entering the industry to give back to the industry. And it doesn't matter what level you are in your career, you can give back. And it's just finding the way that you can give back. And that is the only way that this industry recovers, because things haven't been great the last 4 or 5 years. And all we have is each other.
Absolutely. I definitely believe that, the community, the people is really what drives everything. And, reaching out, giving each other feedback and cheering each other on. It's super
Yeah.
important on, on the wins and clapping to each other and stuff like that. Thank you so much for chatting to us today. It was amazing. I love your career. It's amazing what you do. Thanks so much for motivating us so much. I am very excited for everyone to listen to your story here. And of course, you're welcome to come and visit us in London whenever you want. Yeah, thank you guys for watching or listening if you're listening, and see you next time. Bye bye.